All right, so in the last lesson, we looked at securing our site with Let's Encrypt and making sure that our firewall is working correctly on our server. Now in this lesson, I'm just going to tidy up a couple settings on our new WordPress server before we dive into some full-blown WordPress tutorials. So if you've never used WordPress before, I think that for new users, WordPress can be a little daunting to get into. And I think that this is one thing that WordPress will focus on in 2017 is the ability for new users to adopt their system of content management. There are a lot of tabs in WordPress. You're going to have to get used to opening up many different menus to do different things. And I think that this is probably the area that WordPress could improve on the most is organization of the admin interface. Now to just run through some of the basic things, when you come here, you'll land on your dashboard, which is, in my opinion, more or less useless. There is this important updates tab here that if we click on, it will show us plugins or themes that we can update. And we can also reinstall WordPress if we need to here. It's simply just one click button. I could do it right now, and it would reinstall the latest version of WordPress. WordPress 4.72 in this case, in this day and age. Now, this next tab here is our Posts tab. We have our media library here. We have our pages for static content, our comments. We have our appearance section where we can add themes and widgets and menus. We have our plugins area where we can install plugins to do different things. Our users tab for adding and removing users. We have our tools tab, which we really probably won't be using too much. And then our settings tab, which operates the settings for our plugins as well as the settings for our general WordPress options. So let's take a look at our general settings tab. We want to change our site title to something that's going to show up in Google. For example, if I go to google.com and I type in post status, which is a popular WordPress blog, you can see that there are two things here that show up under Google. One is post status and the second is WordPress news. So what Brian is doing here when he set up his site is for the name of his site, he has it as post status. So I would name this maybe Rusty Guts. And for his tagline, he's using WordPress news. So I might say gaming. And when we look at this website in Google, we would see something very similar to this here. So that's our site and our tagline. Remember we changed our WordPress address URL and our site address URL earlier to HTTPS. We can add in a admin domain name. We can allow people to register. I don't recommend allowing people to register unless you have a specific reason, like if you're running a membership site and people need to register, or if you're running a community blog or some other type of blog where you need to have multiple user accounts, people that can be authors or editors, etc., etc. But if you're just running an individual personal blog, I'd recommend keeping anyone can register disabled. You can set your time zone here if need be. You can also set your date format, custom and all these different options, whatever works for you. And let's go ahead and save those changes. And let's move on to writing. So under the writing tab, we can look at where our default posts are going. In this case, it's going to the default uncategorized category because we haven't created any categories in WordPress yet. We'll leave this as uncategorized for now, and we'll move on to reading. So there's a couple different options you can have. When people land on our front page, we can choose in this setting here what we want people to be able to see when they land on our home page, right? So this home page here. In this case, I want them to be on a static page when they come to my website. I want them to land on my sample page. And I want my post page, just leave this as select. You can change more settings here. I'm going to click Save Changes. And now when I refresh my website, when people land on my website, they're going to be presented with this sample page. And that's just the way that I want to have it set up. And I'll show you more about these configurations in future tutorials. But let's click on the Discussions tab. There's a lot of settings here about different moderation features for comments. In the case of my WordPress development, I use Disqus to manage my comments instead of the native WordPress comments. But if you're using WordPress native comments, you can change the settings here. And if you're using Disqus, I'll show you how, or Disqus, or however they pronounce it, I'll show you how to install that and configure that in later tutorials. Media, we're going to use the default image sizes. When you upload an image to WordPress, initially there are going to be 3 different image sizes that the image is resized to. And you can set those here. I'll talk about this in future videos as well, but I'm just going to be using the default values here for now. Now, permalinks is important. You can change the different URLs that your posts, pages, or other content will have. So if you look at this in depth, you could change it to month and name. You can change it to day and name. In my case, I like using the post name because this is pretty good for SEO optimization. That being, when you go to Google, Google is going to show the actual name of the post in the URL, and that can be a little bit better for SEO optimization. So I usually use post name. I'm going to click Save Changes. Now, important to Easy Engine, this is not usually a WordPress setting, but because we installed WordPress with Easy Engine, we are given 2 plugins, Nginx Helper and Redis. You can see down at the bottom here. So let's click on Nginx Helper, and you can see that this has already been configured for us by the Easy Engine team. And if we click on Redis, Redis is actually disabled by default. So let's go ahead and turn on Redis as an object cache. And know that if you are making changes to your website, it's a good idea to flush Redis, the Redis cache here, as well as flush the Nginx Helper cache here whenever you make lots of changes to your website. And that will make sure that those changes are updated on your website. So just a couple other basic things. You can go through your I suggest that you go through your menus here and try to familiarize yourself with WordPress. For example, plugins, activating and deleting plugins. Plugins are now updated in real time, which is kind of cool. You can see that these are updated. We can activate and deactivate plugins as we see fit. We can add new ones. We can search through the WordPress repository for all sorts of different plugins. And we can do the same for the Appearance tab. Usually I like to delete these other themes. It's just kind of an OCD thing where I don't like to have any themes I'm not using except one. So in most cases, I will have a main theme and I'll have a backup theme. So I'll have 2017 as my theme here until I get something else. And then I'll keep 2 themes just in case one of them has an issue and I need to activate another theme. I have another backup theme that I can use. So I usually always have 2 themes in case one of them goes down, which is very, very rare, but it's just a good practice to have. One thing I'll go into in this tutorial is the menu. Now you can create a menu here, and I'm going to type out home as the menu name and click create menu. And you can see that I can add my sample page. I can add custom links. For example, if I use the # here and add my link text as test. Now I want to make sure that my display location is set to top menu and save this menu out. Now when I navigate back to my website, we should see my menu pop up here. If I click on sample page, it will take me to that page. And since I put in a #, test is actually, the # will actually nullify that link. So that's a good way of creating headers that might house content, and you don't necessarily want people to click on those headers. You just want those links to take them to nowhere, but you want to put like content underneath here. That's a good way to do that. Now, the last thing I'll go over is creating post categories, which is pretty important. So posts is the bread and butter of WordPress. It's really blogging at its core, is creating individual posts for different content. Now, to organize that content is very important. You can create new categories here under the Post Categories tab. And I could create, for example, a category called Photos. And when I create this, it's going to create the title as well as the slug. The slug is simply just the URL that shows up in your web browser. So the slug is usually the same as the name. I can change my default category to say development, or whatever you think that you'll be posting in the most. So my default category my posts go to is development, and I also have a second category called posts, or photos rather. And you can create as many as you like. I try to limit myself to maybe 10 to 15, depending on how much content you plan on posting, but you can really add more whenever you like. And when you create new posts, you can tell those posts to go into certain categories. So let's call this test post. And let's assign this to the category of photos. Maybe let's add some tags. And let's also grab a photo from the internet. Can't go wrong with cute puppies. I'm going to drag this to my desktop. And I'm going to set it as a featured image and just drag in to upload. You can see my puppy there. Maybe we want to create some more photos in the actual post itself. So I'm going to copy some more photos. Look at this dog. And I'm going to add them in by simply clicking the Add Media button and dragging them to upload. And here's our little guys here. Let's go ahead and publish this post. And let's go ahead and click on this link and click Open in New Tab. And you can see now, here's our test post. Here's our featured image. And you can see down here, we have our title, we have our text, as well as our images here. Now, note that all of this interface that you see is customizable. And I'm using the 2017 theme, which comes installed by default on WordPress, just to demonstrate what WordPress would look like when you install it for the first time. There are thousands of themes in the WordPress theme repository. You can add them at any time here. In my case, I usually use premium themes. They're usually $40 to $60, and I only buy them if they have great features that I really do need, because there are a lot of great free themes that you can use instead. One that I like to install is Casper. Casper is a very clean and neat theme. I'm going to go ahead and activate Casper and go ahead and look at what our site now looks like. Whoops. Let's go back to our site and refresh our page. And look at that. We've already changed the look quite substantially of our website. Okay, so in this tutorial, we looked at creating our website themes. We looked at uploading some plugins. We looked at the basic core of WordPress, changing our site URL and description, and just basic WordPress configuration. In the next lesson, we'll dive deeper into WordPress, and I'll show you some tips and tricks to displaying your content, as well as what premium themes and premium plugins look like in WordPress.